All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Mental Health Colorado's Brainwave Advocacy Training webinar. We're so excited to have you here today, and we're excited to jump right in. If you have any questions during the presentation, you could submit your questions through the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer them through the presentation, and we'll also have time afterwards to address any questions. This meeting is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you via email, and it will also be posted on our website. So let's get started. So for today's agenda, we'll start with introductions and talk about who we are and our mission. We'll talk about what it means to be an advocate and jump into what it looks like to advocate at the Capitol. And so just to start with team introductions, my name is Ashley Perales, and I'm the Development and Operations Manager with Mental Health Colorado. I'm also the Program Manager for the Brainwave. Vincent?
Hi, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Vincent Atchity. I'm the President and CEO of Mental Health Colorado, and we're excited to have you here for our Brainwave webinar training. Wendy.
Good afternoon. I'm Wendy Buxton Andrade. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs and excited to bring you guys on this journey today.
Thank you. All right, so just a quick intro to Mental Health Colorado. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization dedicated to promoting well-being, ensuring access to housing, healthcare supports and services, and ending health-based discrimination. Our Brainwave is our statewide network of over 1,700 advocates across Colorado, and Brainwave members really help illustrate the barriers to care that Coloradans face by sharing lived experiences with lawmakers, the media, and the community. So what does it mean to be an advocate? Advocacy means taking public action to influence change. It spans across our everyday lives, from our conversations with our friends, our families, our coworkers, and then even goes to sharing stories in the media and signing up to testify at the Capitol. Um, So advocacy can be a heavy experience that brings up a lot of big feelings. Knowing who to reach out to beforehand and practicing some self-care, some grounding techniques are really effective ways to take care of your own well-being. And advocacy can also be incredibly healing as we stand up for ourselves and the people that we love who experience similar issues. We had the privilege of having a Brainwave member join us at our annual gala last year, and they talked about how advocacy had helped them channel their anger. Wendy, will you share an example of a time you experienced healing through advocacy?
With me, one of the great experience I've had is sharing my personal family story. It's very healing to tell your story and have people understand why advocacy works with your telling your story. And so I've kept it brief. You take out a lot of your personal information, but tell your story so that they know you can relate to them and how the advocacy can change the system in the long run. And that's how I've been able to share my story and make sure that, it helps me know that I'm not alone. I'm making a difference. And the advocacy is changing the system so somebody else doesn't have to go through the same thing I did.
Thank you, Wendy. When we talk about caring for our communities, really what we're saying is have authentic conversations and model compassion and share a part of yourself. We can help end health-based discrimination by seeking to understand others and sharing information and resources to help others understand issues they may not be familiar with. Vincent, what does it mean to end health-based discrimination? And can you talk about self-directed discrimination and why it's important to recognize and address?
Sure, thank you. So we started talking about ending health-based discrimination instead of talking about fighting stigma, as is so often the practice in mental health advocacy environments. And we made that move because stigma is a vague term that is scarcely understood and is not very actionable when it comes to creating changes in behavior or access. whereas discrimination is something with which we are institutionally familiar. And the truth is, when it comes to accessing healthcare, supports, services, housing, quality of education, we've got a far wider prevalence of health-based discrimination than we may often suspect. Our access to care for certain conditions is greatly accelerated compared to our access to care when it is a mental health condition or a substance use related condition. And that is a plain area of inequity in our systems practices, which we are determined to change as an advocacy organization. And I think you asked me about self-directed discrimination, Ashley, and given the way we have responded to mental health and substance use related conditions across our cultural history, we all of us have embedded in us a tendency to be disparaging or dismissive when it comes to mental health and substance use related needs for healthcare supports and services. We're unkinder to ourselves the way we think of and talk to ourselves than we often are to others with similar conditions. And it's sort of like the chicken or the egg. We're caught in a discriminatory kind of vortex that is not helpful to our well-being, nor does it help us advance our cause of more equitable access that's on parity with the way we access care for all conditions.
Thank you, Vincent. We'll talk a little bit about sharing your experience. Everyone has a story to tell, and if you're here, it probably means that you have experience with mental health or substance use. And when you share experiences, your experience in these areas, whether it's talking to a friend, posting online, or speaking at the Capitol, you're helping to end health-based discrimination by normalizing the conversation and humanizing these issues. Wendy, as a former elected official, can you share an example of a time that someone impacted your decision-making or understanding of an issue by sharing their story?
As an elected official, of course, you're always in the education side of things. You haven't always had the experience, but you're also wanting to make the change. When people come to me, and when I was elected official, I didn't realize some of the things were happening in our community. So people's personal story and how we needed to make the change um, meant something because I was in a position to make the change. So when you tell your story to an elected official, always make sure that you have an outcome of what are some of the things that need to change to make the system better. Education means change. So when I had people come to me and they talked about the community not giving second chances, that was the first thing I wanted to do. And we put together a program to bring in second chances and normalize second chances. And that's where your story can really make a difference because maybe that elected official does not understand the full aspects of some of the things that are happening in their community. So speak your story and make sure to educate the elected officials on how something needs to change. Thanks.
That's great, Wendy. Thank you so much. When we talk about sharing our story, one of the biggest ways that you can make an impact is by using your platform. Social media can be a great tool for advocacy. These platforms offer a place to share resources, educate your community, and help end health-based discrimination by sharing your story. There's a QR here that'll direct you to our Mental Health Colorado platforms. So please do follow us, and we offer lots of resources that you can share with amongst your network. And you can also tag us on your posts to help amplify your message. Vincent, when using social media as a tool for advocacy, especially when we're sharing our personal experiences, what are some important things to consider? Oh, sorry, Vincent, you're muted.
I think it's important to remember that we do live in a historically discriminatory environment when it comes to a variety of different health conditions. And so we have to be a little bit cautious about what we're sharing and how widely. Uh, we need to be very mindful that we are sharing, that it is fair game to carefully and responsibly share our own lived experience and stories, but in a social media setting, sharing the stories of others, of loved ones or children or parents, that is probably inappropriate, due to the fact that that kind of exposure can last forever in the internet. So what we put out there, we need to put out there responsibly and protectively and primarily about ourselves. And the point is not to do extensive oversharing that is across a wide variety of sort of blended topics, but to be very focused and topical in what we share and tie it to the specific bill or cause for which we're advocating. And that helps us narrow our representation of our experience as well.
Thanks, Vincent. That's very helpful information, I'm sure. Um, awesome. Well, as we begin talking about legislative advocacy at the Capitol, I think it's helpful to understand a bit about the legislative process here in Colorado. Wendy, will you please walk us through how a bill becomes a law in Colorado and where in this process advocates can make an impact?
It's a long process. It is not one that is short-lived. Um, once a bill is titled and a representative or a senator is sponsoring it, it goes through both the Senate and the House, and it goes through committees. If it starts in like the Senate, it goes through their committees. It has to be approved through their committee, whatever committee it is assigned to. Then it goes to the Finance Committee after that. Um, Once it's approved through the Finance Committee, then it goes to the floor. It has to pass the floor. Then once it passes one department like the Senate, it goes back and starts the process again in the House. And it goes through the same process in the House. Once it has passed both chambers, then and it has to be the exact same bill. If it is changed in either chamber, the changing chamber has to go to the other chamber and it has to pass again on their floor. Then once the exact same bill and amendments and everything are approved and it passes both, it goes to the governor, and the governor can sign it or he can veto it. Once either one of those, or there's a 30-day process, and some bills become a law without a governor signature, but most of them have the governor's signature or a veto, and then it becomes law when it specifically dates. Sometimes it's immediately when the governor signs it, and sometimes it has a specific date of enactment.
Okay, and so when the bill is on the governor's desk for 30 days and he hasn't signed it, then it just becomes a law automatically. Is that what the
Yes,
30 process is? Okay, just wanted to clarify
yes.
that. Thank you. Um, Beautiful. And then just some key points. The regular session in Colorado is January through May. Committee hearings are open for public comment, so that's your chance to join and testify. The Appropriation Committee can make or break a bill, and so that's something to consider throughout this process. And if a bill doesn't pass, it can be reintroduced the following year. So there's still opportunities for that bill to be seen again.
Ashley, you're on mute.
Thank you. That's helpful. So we mentioned testifying at the Capitol during committee hearings, and I wanted to dive a little deeper into this topic. So testifying means speaking directly to lawmakers, often during a committee hearing, uh, about how a proposed law will affect you, your family, your clients, or your community. Anyone can sign up to give testimony before a hearing, and testimony can be written, in person, or virtual. There are set time limits for testimony. It's typically 3 minutes, but sometimes it can be 2 minutes if there are a lot of people giving testimony, and you won't know until you get there. So that's an important thing to consider. Vincent, as someone who's given testimony, a lot of testimony at the Capitol, will you share some suggestions on writing effective testimony?
Sure thing. Yeah, and I mean, I think that right off the bat, writing is the key feature, is to prepare your testimony in writing and rehearse it enough at home so that you're reading it comfortably in such a way as not to be perceived as reading. And yet have it there as a script because it's essential for timing. And practicing at home repeatedly is essential because you'll may be surprised at the amount of words that you can utter in the space of 3 minutes. I find that it's somewhere between 500 and 600 or so words, speaking pretty probably too quickly. So getting that down to a comfortable pace is important. I would also say that given the fact that the committee chair can change the amount of time you're allotted at any given moment in the course of a panel, you should be prepared to cut your testimony way down right on the spot. And so to that end, your draft, I advise having certain paragraphs that are italicized or in bold or otherwise indicated as paragraphs that you can drop off at a moment's notice if you need to remove 60 seconds from your testimony. So within that timing framework and that rehearsal and scripting framework, the main thing that's going to make testimony effective is the clarity with which it illustrates the point you're making about the bill in question. Often bills are sprawling things with pages and pages of features. So speaking to the bill in general is better than nothing, perhaps. But what really makes testimony compelling is when you can call out the particular section or feature of a bill and tie that with a story that you have lived through, so that in very brief words, you're making your hearers empathize and understand what it is you're saying, so that you're grabbing them by both their hearts and their minds as efficiently as possible. And then the testimony has three parts. It's an introduction of yourself, it is making your clear, sharp point, and it is thanking them for their service and for considering your point of view in making their decision.
Thank you, Vincent. I wanted to share an example of testimony that was given. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of here if I can. Oh, okay. And then we'll go to testimony here. And so this is testimony that was given on Senate Bill 23-176, protections for people with an eating disorder. And Vincent, can you give a little bit of background on this bill so that people understand the point of the testimony that we're about to hear?
Sure. Mental Health Colorado helped run this piece of legislation in order to increase, or in order to really create some standards of care around access and quality of care for eating disorder conditions, which have not had much in the way of consumer protections in place anywhere in the country, really. And yet the reported experiences of poor treatment or inadequate access to care are fairly extensive. And some of that is what is presented in the testimony for this bill.
Thank you. All right, so I'll go ahead and play this recording. It's a great example of effective testimony.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Please introduce yourself and begin.
Good afternoon, members of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. My name is M. Troughton, and I'm representing myself to testify in support of Senate Bill 176. I'm here today because I survived a nearly fatal eating disorder. I'm here today because I know firsthand that the use of the BMI to determine a patient's appropriate level of care is killing people. I've struggled with an eating disorder since I was in high school. I've been a patient at the Eating Recovery Center in Denver 3 times, first in 2017, then 2018, and then 2020. In 2017, I was admitted to inpatient in grave danger. Because of a slowed metabolism, my body temperature had plummeted. Due to decreasing potassium levels, starvation migraines kept me awake at night. Resulting from dehydration, the bruises on my body prevented me from sitting in chairs or receiving hugs. A lack of calcium stopped my period, made my bones brittle, made my hair fall out in clumps. Despite these progressing symptoms, I only got into treatment because eventually my BMI was finally low enough that my illness was validated by medical professionals. Once in treatment, I gained weight quickly. I was pleasant and compliant because I craved care. I ate the food, I did the worksheets, I talked in therapy groups. I was still very sick. I had refeeding syndrome, which caused immense abdominal pain. My body was swollen from electrolyte imbalances, triggering my body dysmorphia. As I regained cognitive clarity, my emotions compounded, and I didn't know how to process them. I certainly wasn't ready for discharge. Throughout my stays in Colorado's eating disorder treatment facilities, I watched as other patients of all shapes and sizes got expelled. Nobody knew when or why it would happen to them. We lived in fear of how our BMIs might be assessed. I tried to circumvent insurance's dismissal by eating half of my meal plan in treatment so as to not gain much weight too fast. I wanted time for my brain to adapt, for my mind to stabilize, but then I was threatened with tube feeding and room confinement. There was no way through but to accept eventual rejection on the basis of my BMI. After just a couple weeks in residential treatment, insurance cut me. They decided my body size meant I was healed. Eating disorder patients deserve full and fair treatment based on a holistic review of their condition. Each time I was sent home because my BMI was acceptable to an insurance company, I relapsed, resulting in the need for additional care. If Senate Bill 176 had been implemented, I know for a fact that I wouldn't have needed to go back to residential treatment in 2018 and 2020. I'm lucky I lived, but I've seen too many of my fellow patients and friends die because their BMI dictated their access to care. Sadly, during COVID, I tuned into more virtual memorial services than I can count on both hands, watching parents cry as they lamented a system that had failed their children. The use of BMI to determine the severity of an eating disorder is harmful to all bodies. As someone who has entered treatment both as an emaciated person and as a person of perceived normal body weight, I know that BMI remains the biggest barrier to care for folks with eating disorders, and I urge you to vote yes on SB 174 because the use of the BMI as criteria for determining whether someone can access care is killing people. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much for that powerful testimony. We're going to hold off and ask questions at the end, but really, thank you. Welcome.
I feel like I need to take a deep breath after that one. Definitely a very impactful testimony, and a good example of relating a story specifically to a bill and making an impact on legislators' decisions. Vincent, Wendy, do you have any extra comments on that?
My biggest comment is make sure that you keep your testimony just as that person did, related to the bill. So we make sure we have the most impact and the legislators have a chance to learn about how this bill is going to impact change.
You're on mute.
I'm going to figure this out. We're going to do this together. Thank you, Vincent. I was just apologizing for having to skip through all the slides again, but we're going to get back on track here with our testimony page. And then now we're going to talk about lobbying. So lobbying your legislator involves meeting or communicating with them to explain your position, share your personal story, and urge them to support or oppose specific bills. And you can do this by calling, by emailing them, or writing a letter. or by scheduling time to meet them in person. You can also attend Mental Health Colorado's Legislative Education and Advocacy Day at the Capitol, where we gather with advocates in March and head to the Capitol to meet with our legislators in person. Vincent, will you talk about why lobbying our legislators is important and how this can affect policy decisions?
Sure. Happy to. Our elected officials are elected by the constituents in the communities that they represent. And they're usually elected based on a platform of values that they've shared during the campaign period. When it comes to fulfilling the duties of the elected official, it's through lobbying and through contact with the constituents that the elected officials are informed and empowered and motivated to carry on with the work that they're doing. In the course of any given legislative session, over 500 different bills may be considered by the two chambers under the dome. And they are across the board with about every single last imaginable thing, from transportation to water rights to oil and gas, et cetera, et cetera. Uh, Health is an area of concern, but it's not necessarily an area that there are a lot of people under the dome trying to inform elected officials about the important features of the bill that's under consideration. Um, so our presence, the presence of the brainwave, so that elected officials understand that this matter, whether it's eating disorder care access or other things that we have advocated for in the past and expect to advocate for in the future, are relevant to the people they've been elected to represent. Given our belief in representative government and the belief that we are a self-governing people through this mechanism, keeping that channel of communication alive is, I think, one of our most important things we can do as a civic duty, is making sure that if we've got a story and it's relevant to a law that's been proposed, we need to share it and speak up so that decision makers are not making a decision in a vacuum or in an echo chamber.
Thank you, Vincent. So, like Vincent was mentioning, Colorado has 65 members of the House of Representatives and 35 members of Senate. Each of these officials are assigned to districts throughout Colorado, and they want to hear directly from their constituents who live in their districts. If you're not sure who your legislators are, you can scan this QR code here on the screen to find your legislators, to identify them. And Wendy, legislators are accustomed to hearing from their constituents about their concerns, but it can be a thankless job. Can you talk about how meaningful it is to acknowledge when our legislators are doing a good job?
Our legislators get a lot of times it's very heavy on them because people tend to not say thank you. They hear the bad things, they hear everything they didn't do. But one of the things that we want to remember is every legislator is human. It is nice to get that personal thank you note from all of our brainwavers when they actually vote to support a bill that means something and makes the meaningful change. So take out that thank you note, write them a special handwritten thank you note, mail it to them, send them that email that says thank you, because they need to know that people are watching them and we appreciate their public service to us. And that's how you get a legislator to also be loyal to you and know that that your voice is being heard by them. So that personal thank you means something.
That's great. Thank you, Wendy. As a side note, Mental Health Colorado, if you don't know how your legislators are voting on our priority bills, we do release a legislative report and scorecard each year that shows the different ways that each legislator voted on these bills. So you can have a good outlook of if they voted along with your priorities and a perfect starting point for sending those thank you notes. All right, and I just wanted to add in some information about how you can support advocacy in other ways. You can volunteer with Mental Health Colorado. We do a lot of community events. That's a photo from a game at the Rapids. We do booth events at different community events, and it's just always really great to have brainwavers there to talk about our work and the impact we're all making together. And you can also donate to Mental Health Colorado to support these efforts. And again, follow us on social media, like, share all the content, tag us, just to amplify all of our collective voices. And here are some key resources related to what we've been talking about to kind of help you along your advocacy journey. I will include all of these in a follow-up email, and they're also available in our advocacy toolkit, which you can find at mentalhealthcolorado.org/toolkits. And thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today, for watching this recording. Thank you, Vincent and Wendy, for sharing your time and expertise. I'm going to open up the Q&A here to see if there's any lingering questions. And I don't see any, so I think that means we're doing a good job of explaining everything correctly. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope everyone has a great week.